Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. I was chatting with my 9-year-old last night. We were watching a crappy old 80s movie, and she said to me, "What's a nuke?" And as gentle as possible, without destroying her little world, I tried to explain to her that when I was growing up, there were the Soviets, and we were all afraid that they were going to start a war at any minute, a war which would be over in about an hour. I then showed her some footage of a nuclear bomb going off. Nothing graphic, not like that one on the carrier where they have the animals screaming and everything tied up. No, just straight, it goes off, ruins a city, and just to give her an idea of the destructive power. And she seemed to accept that explanation and move on. But it occurred to me, she had no concept, not even the remotest inkling, of the pure terror that we were raised with. And pretty much anybody before 1980, and maybe a couple pretty mature people from 82 or 83, we were born into that system where at any moment your life could end. And it would have nothing to do with what you did. We're used to the standard dangers, like don't walk out into traffic, don't poke the bear, stuff like that. But a nuclear war is the kind of thing that can wipe you out in 30 minutes to an hour's notice. It's almost as fast as getting a pizza. Let's examine the psychological effect that is left on the baby boomers, the lost generation, and Generation X. I'm not going to say Generation Y, not because I don't think they understand it, but just simply by the definition, they were raised in a culture where people were disarming and it was not being used as much of a threat. I know in my life, in Silverlight's life, there are at least 4 opportunities where the button was nearly pushed. In 1982, where Flight 007 was taken down, there was a U.S. senator aboard that plane. And the Russians were convinced that the United States was going to strike first. And they almost hit the button, but fortunately cooler heads prevailed. In 1977, the Soviets received a bad signal from one of their stations. They're about to launch. But fortunately, cooler heads prevailed, and one smart general said, "Hold on, let's be absolutely sure this signal is real, because it's weird that the United States would launch one single missile at us, so let's be rational." Again, calmer, cooler heads prevailed, and it turned out it was just a system bug. Same thing happened to the United States a couple times. And here we are in 2022, where there's this perception that China might be poised to nuke everybody. Well, that's not quite true. You see, the USSR, the Soviets, the Russians, whatever you want to call them in any time frame, they have always had a policy of not striking first. And while they have the most nuclear warheads of anybody on the planet, a little over 10,000, say close to 11,000, rounded up, they have tried repeatedly to get the United States to promise not to be the first ones to fire, because it's a good idea. If you both sign a treaty where nobody's going to fire first, then you don't need to worry about the horrors of a nuclear war. The United States, who has consistently refused to sign that treaty, has about 9,000 something nuclear warheads ready to go, rounded up to 10,000. And we know United States technology would allow them to drop that on anybody's parking lot anywhere on the planet. China, on the other hand, only has about 400. China is to be praised for its policy of restraint, because they could easily produce many more. There's lots of sources of uranium. They certainly have the technical know-how to process it. But they realize the smartest thing is not to go insane and build all sorts of them, but just have enough to make anybody think twice before attacking you. They can't go toe-to-toe with Russia, the United States, and keep in mind, China and Russia, for a lot of their history, have not gotten along. Even the Soviet Unions and the Red Chinese, as they're colloquially known, have not seen eye to eye. Right now, they're in a temporary period of being okay with each other because they need allies, but they're not hard and fast friends. So the Chinese nuclear arsenal is just as much to deter the Russians as it is to deter the United States. The good news is, in any war with China, if they decided to launch, they would only be able to hit about 300 or 400 cities. That's not good for those 300 or 400 cities, but it means the damage would be primarily contained to the biggest cities in the United States and the biggest military bases. So the US could possibly survive that nuclear strike, especially if they keep advancing their anti-ballistic missile technology. The danger is, once people start throwing down with nuclear weapons, everybody wants to get involved in the party. Even countries that aren't involved might fire because in all the chaos of all those multiple tens of thousands of missiles going off, they might not be able to detect which ones are focused on them and which ones are not. So let's take England or France, just as a for instance. They're pretty close to Russia. The bombers will be in Britain and France before the nukes hit the United States. So they might want to get their nuclear forces involved before anything else happens. We also have all the cases of the countries that are hiding their nuclear arsenals. And I don't say this to accuse anybody. It's assumed Israel has a nuclear arsenal, but South Africa was able to hide theirs for decades before they voluntarily gave their nuclear weapons up. And there's a few really good, well-documented pieces of research that show Israel and South Africa worked together using German technicians to develop their nuclear arsenals. Now, why would West Germany, now Germany, be involved? Because Germany, while they are no longer the Germans of the 1940s, they're more pragmatic. And having a couple nukes in store just to call anybody's bluff is a very practical thing to do. Everybody focuses on Israel's secret arsenal, but the fact is there's so many secrets out there we don't even know about them. Remember how long the United States kept their F-117 fighters, even though they're bombers? Remember how long they kept them secret? Nearly a whole decade. And the program was over a decade long. No funding was attributed to it, nothing. And now they're coming out and announcing their stealth bombers half a decade before they even start working on them. So whatever they've got now, they're hiding it. So we live in a world where we think we are free from the nuclear Holocaust that we were expecting as children. But it still looms large in our minds. Us older people who were raised in an era where disarmament was the cool thing to do. And you know what? It still is cool. People are just thinking they need to rearm because of some macho patriot crap. No. You can modernize your weapons, but you don't need to build thousands of them. We're not in a world war situation, and hopefully we never will be. But look at the psychological damage that Generation X, the boomers, and everybody has gone through, because we were aware it could end at any moment. And it still could. The interesting part about the treaty that I always found hysterical, absolutely slap your leg and pee your pants funny, was that one of the things they did to safeguard, and safeguards in quotations, was to remove the targeting information from the warheads while they're sitting on the ground. Anybody ever loaded a website? Anybody ever looked up on Google Maps? Yeah, the Russians and the Chinese aren't too far behind, if at all, in that technology. So you've delayed the warheads coming online for seconds. And that's assuming that the technology is 10, 15 years behind in the manufacture of their targeting systems, which is likely because it takes a long time to assemble a nuclear warhead. But a big treaty stipulation is only worth seconds. So we could still be facing a full-blown nuclear war, and we have a generation that is wonderfully free of that terror, but also wonderfully underprepared. So next time you see somebody gallivanting around carefree, think about how wonderful it is that they were not raised in the spectacle of terror that was the Cold War. And then remember, you were. And what kind of damage it did to you? Well, we weren't duck and cover people, but we still had our own, find yourself a safe distance, and if you can, go to ground, blah, blah, blah. So it wasn't much better. No matter what, I hope this information never becomes of use to anybody besides looking at the psychological difference between Generation X and Generation Y. We wish to thank you for joining us for the Silverlight Show. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, buy one of the books listed in the description down below, and we hope you have a fantastic day.